All right, let's talk about one of the absolute biggest buzzwords out there right now, big data. We hear it everywhere, right? But today, we're going to bring some real structure to this massive concept. We're breaking down exactly what it means, how it actually behaves in the real world, and why it's completely revolutionizing how we understand, well, everything.
So, have you ever wondered what happens when our traditional data management tools just break? I mean, literally snap under the weight of modern information? Think about it. We generate data every single time we swipe a card, post a photo online, or even take a flight. But what happens when that data goes from, nice, manageable spreadsheets to an absolute avalanche that those traditional systems just can't handle anymore?
Okay, let's dive into this. To put this into perspective, let's look at a pretty wild example. A single jet engine can generate over 10 terabytes of data in just 30 minutes of flight time. 10 terabytes! Now multiply that by the thousands of flights happening every single day. We aren't just in terabyte territory anymore, we're rapidly hitting petabytes. We are talking about an almost incomprehensible amount of real-time information.
So, here's our roadmap for this explainer. First, welcome to big data. Second, the 3 data types. Third, the 4 V's. And finally, surviving the data flood.
Section 1. Welcome to big data. Let's define the core concept.
Right, so big data isn't just more data. It's a collection of data that is so huge in volume and growing so exponentially fast over time that it reaches a size and complexity where traditional data management tools just give up. They literally cannot store it or process it efficiently. Think about the massive, split-second outputs from a stock exchange or the never-ending feed of a social networking site. It's data, for sure, but it is operating on an entirely different scale of magnitude.
Moving on to Section 2, the 3 data types. Let's look at the structural anatomy.
Now, big data generally falls into 3 specific buckets: structured, unstructured, and semi-structured. And what's really fascinating is that third category, semi-structured data, because it actually contains both forms. A perfect example of this is an XML file. It's data that systematically blends fixed and unknown forms together.
This really highlights the great divide in modern analytics. On one hand, you have structured data. This is data in a fixed format, well known in advance. And honestly, over the years, we've achieved a lot of success developing techniques to work with this kind of data and derive real value from it. But then, on the other hand, you have unstructured data. This has an unknown form or structure. And beyond just being huge, it poses multiple severe processing challenges when we try to actually pull any meaningful value out of it.
All right, Section 3, the 4 V's. Here is your mental checklist for identifying big data out in the wild.
So our first V is volume. The enormous size of the data plays an absolutely crucial role in determining its value. In fact, whether a particular dataset can actually be considered big data or not entirely depends on this volume. The name big data itself is directly related to this enormous size. The second V is variety. Variety refers to the heterogeneous sources and the nature of the data, whether it's structured, unstructured, or semi-structured. In the earlier days, applications really only considered spreadsheets and databases. But today, your data could be emails, photos, videos, signals from monitoring devices, PDFs, audio files, you name it. All of these incredibly varied formats have to be analyzed.
Now for the third V, and that's velocity. This refers to the massive, breakneck speed of data generation and processing required to actually be responsive to customer needs. Big data velocity deals with the speed at which data continuously flows in from business processes, application logs, networks, social media sites, sensors, mobile devices. The flow is just massive and relentless. And the final V on our checklist is variability. Data isn't always a perfect, steady stream. Variability refers to the inconsistency shown by the data at times. And when your data behaves unpredictably, it seriously hampers the process of being able to handle and manage that information effectively.
Section 4, surviving the data flood. Let's bring this all back to reality.
So, what should you really take away from all this? Well, big data isn't just some corporate IT headache. It's a living, breathing ecosystem that we all participate in every single day. Every smart device you wear, every social media post you like, it all feeds into that massive volume, variety, and velocity we just talked about. Which leaves us with a pretty provocative question to end on. How are you contributing to the massive velocity and volume of big data today?
We're diving into a couple of terms you hear constantly in the corporate world: big data and cloud computing. Now, I know,
They sound like intimidating tech buzzwords, the kind of stuff you just leave to the IT department, right? Well, actually, they're not. They are super accessible, absolute game changers for modern business efficiency. So stick around, because by the end of this, you're going to see exactly how these tools work together to totally transform everyday operations.
Let's take a quick look at our roadmap for today. We'll start with the power of big data, figure out what exactly cloud computing is, break down the 3 main cloud services, compare public and private clouds, and then wrap it all up with the ultimate business benefits. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. The power of big data. So, before we figure out exactly where modern information lives, we need to answer the big question, why? Why is processing all this data such a massive advantage for businesses today?
Well, when a business actually processes big data the right way, it unlocks a massive strategic edge in 4 specific areas. First off, you can utilize outside intelligence to make decisions. So no more crossing your fingers and relying on gut instinct or limited internal numbers. Second, having all that deep data drives vastly improved customer service. You can literally anticipate what your customers need before they even ask. Third, and this one is a total lifesaver, it helps with the early identification of risks to your products or services. You can spot a bad trend and fix the problem way before it becomes a disaster. And finally, all of this naturally leads to much better operational efficiency across the whole organization.
All right, Section 2. What is cloud computing? Now that we know why the data itself is so incredibly valuable, let's switch gears and talk about the how. How do we actually store and process it all? Let's demystify the cloud.
If we strip away all the fancy jargon, cloud computing is really just a general term for anything that involves delivering hosted services over the internet. That is literally it. Instead of having a giant, noisy physical server humming away in a back closet somewhere or stuffing your local hard drives full of files, you're tapping into computing power and storage that lives somewhere else, and you're accessing it seamlessly through the web.
And hey, if the concept of the cloud still feels a bit abstract to you, just take a second to look at your own daily routine. Think about Google Docs, Microsoft 365, your everyday email services, Google Calendar, Skype, WhatsApp, Zoom. Guess what? You're already an expert cloud user. Every single time you shoot off a WhatsApp message or type on a shared Google Doc, you are leveraging cloud computing. You're effortlessly accessing a hosted service over the internet without even thinking about it.
Okay, moving on to Section 3, the 3 cloud services. Now that we've nailed down what the cloud is, let's look under the hood. It's not just one giant monolithic thing. Its architecture is actually divided into 3 main categories of service.
The first category is Infrastructure as a Service, or IaaS. You can think of this as the base foundational layer. IaaS providers, like Amazon Web Services, or AWS for short, give you a virtual server instance and storage. They also provide application programming interfaces, or APIs, that let users easily migrate their workloads over to a virtual machine. What this means for you is ultimate control over the foundation. You get an allocated storage capacity, and you can start, stop, access, and configure that virtual machine completely however you want.
Let's step up one layer to Platform as a Service, or PaaS. In the PaaS model, cloud providers take it up a notch by actually hosting development tools right on their own infrastructure. Users just hop on the internet and access these tools using APIs, web portals, or gateway software. This setup is mostly used for general software development. And the best part? It completely frees developers from having to stress about the underlying hardware. A lot of PaaS providers will even host the software for you once you've finished building it. And finally, we hit the very top layer, which is the one most of us interact with every single day: Software as a Service, or SaaS. This is essentially a distribution model that delivers software applications right over the internet. You'll often hear these called web services. With SaaS, you get instant access to application software and databases from literally anywhere, as long as you've got a computer or a mobile device and an internet connection. It is the absolute ultimate in effortless software delivery. Which brings us to Section 4, Public versus Private Clouds. So whether a business is using infrastructure, platforms, or software, the actual cloud environment itself can be deployed in 2 distinct ways. The big difference here really comes down to access. A public cloud sells its services to anyone on the internet. It's like a massive open market of computing power available to everybody.
On the flip side, a private cloud is a proprietary network or a dedicated data center that supplies its hosted services to a very limited, specific group of people using strict access and permission settings. But you know what? Whether you go with the wide-open public route or the lockdown private route, the end goal is exactly the same, providing easy, scalable access to computing resources and IT services.
All right, let's bring it all home with Section 5, the ultimate business benefits. We've talked about the what and the how, so now we really need to look at the why. How does cloud computing actually transform and benefit modern businesses?
First up is cost management. And let me tell you, the financial impact here is huge. Cloud infrastructure totally slashes capital costs because organizations simply do not have to drop massive amounts of money buying and maintaining physical equipment anymore. Plus, you don't need large, expensive in-house IT teams to babysit a data center because you can confidently rely on the experts at your cloud provider to handle that. And since cloud infrastructure is highly reliable, it also significantly cuts down on those painful costs associated with system downtime.
The second major win is data and workload mobility. The cloud lets you access your corporate data from anywhere, using any device, smartphones, tablets, you name it, as long as you have internet. That means the days of carrying around easily lost USB thumb drives, lugging around external hard drives, or digging through a stack of CDs just to find a file are totally over. This incredible mobility enables remote employees to stay perfectly up to date with coworkers and customers. You can process, store, retrieve, and recover resources effortlessly. And as a cherry on top, cloud vendors handle all the software upgrades and updates automatically, saving businesses a massive amount of time and effort.
The third benefit, and this might just be the most critical one of all, tackles the absolute biggest fear in the digital world: data loss. This is where business continuity and disaster recovery, or BCDR, comes into play. Storing your data in the cloud is essentially the ultimate safety net. It guarantees that you can always access your data, even if your laptop gets run over or your smartphone dies. With cloud-based services, organizations can bounce back incredibly fast from major emergencies, like natural disasters or power outages. It gives you total peace of mind, ensuring your vital workloads and data stay online even if the physical business takes a huge hit.
So, we've seen how processing big data gives you that serious strategic edge, and how cloud computing provides the scalable, secure, and cost-effective foundation to make it all happen. Which really just leaves us with one critical question to think about as we wrap up this explainer. Is your business fully leveraging the cloud to process big data, cut those capital costs, and guarantee resilience when things go wrong? It is absolutely a question every modern business needs to answer.
Look, we constantly hear about the cloud as this ultimate business savior, right? Like it's a magical realm of infinite storage, unparalleled flexibility, and massive cost savings. But today we're doing a much-needed reality check. Because while cloud computing absolutely offers transformative benefits, it also brings a whole host of serious demerits and causes for concern that organizations frankly ignore until it's way too late. So we're going to unpack those 10 massive risks right now. But to really understand why companies rush into the cloud despite these risks, we've got to look at the ultimate success story, and that is Adobe. Instead of just holding steadfast to their traditional business model, Adobe proactively moved their entire product base online back in 2013, and wow, did it pay off. By 2018, they hit a record quarterly revenue of $2.2 billion in just their second fiscal quarter. That is a massive 24% year-on-year growth. I mean, numbers like that make every CEO on the planet want to migrate immediately. And a huge reason for that leap? Moving away from physical software solved Adobe's massive piracy problem. The harsh reality was that a huge chunk of users simply weren't paying. Their physical software actually made up 10 of the top 20 downloaded products on illegal torrenting sites worldwide. That's wild. But by shifting to cloud-delivered software, where all functionality is hosted and controlled online, piracy dropped drastically. It was a brilliant move that completely empowered creative businesses to embrace digital transformation. So here's the tension. If the financial and operational rewards are literally in the billions, why is digital transformation so dangerous for everyone else? Why do so many migration projects totally fail, blow past budgets, or end in catastrophic data leaks? Well, Adobe's success definitely isn't guaranteed for everyone. Behind those massive revenue numbers hide 10 distinct demerits of cloud computing that can absolutely cripple an unprepared organization. Let's kick things off with reality check number 1, security, governance, and compliance. When you move to the cloud, the very nature of how you manage your foundational IT pillars changes completely. You're suddenly facing 3 immediate threats. First, severe data security risks. Second, a total loss of IT governance. Because cloud computing really emphasizes this do-it-yourself vibe, governance becomes incredibly tough. You lose direct control over provisioning, deprovisioning, and managing your infrastructure operations. And third, the total nightmare of managing regulatory compliance through a third party. Moving data from your local servers into the cloud makes adhering to strict industry laws highly complex, simply because you're now relying on an external vendor to keep you legally compliant. And speaking of that external vendor, entrust your data to the cloud, and you're essentially dealing with a black box. There is a clear, definitive lack of transparency regarding exactly how and where your sensitive information is handled. You're risking data breaches, hacked APIs, and serious authentication issues. You're basically handing over the keys to your most valuable asset, your data, and losing all visibility into how those keys are actually guarded.
Moving right along to reality check number 2, cost, performance, and expertise.
Now we're getting into the day-to-day operational hurdles that can hit your bottom line hard. We're talking about unpredictable budgets, devastating network outages that can just halt your business processes, and the absolute struggle to hire people with the right skill sets. Cloud technologies are advancing so fast that organizations are genuinely scrambling to find employees who know how to architect and manage these workloads. Plus, if you don't have rock-solid contingency plans, provider outages will completely tank your productivity. And let's talk about the money. The pay-as-you-go model sounds amazing for scaling resources to meet fluctuating workload demands, right? But in reality, it makes predicting your final IT costs nearly impossible. A sudden spike in user traffic, or even just some poorly optimized code running in the background, can cause your resources to autoscale. The result? An absolutely astronomical, budget-destroying bill at the end of the month that you never saw coming. Finally, we arrive at reality check number 3, migration, private clouds, and lock-in. Getting into the cloud, managing it, and trying to leave it are basically operational landmines. Just the process of migrating applications often causes deep complications, frequently taking way longer and costing way more than anticipated. Then, architecting and managing private clouds is a truly daunting task for any IT department. And because every cloud is fundamentally different, trying to manage multiple clouds at once can completely disjoint your broader IT efforts. But the absolute worst trap? Vendor lock-in. Imagine realizing your cloud provider is failing you, but leaving them is virtually impossible. Switching providers isn't like changing your internet service. You're looking at massive technical incompatibilities, complex legal limitations, and ruinous data migration costs. Once you're in, that provider has a terrifying amount of leverage over your business. Okay, so how do we handle this? Let's look at making the shift work. With all 10 of these massive demerits stacked against them, from security blind spots to vendor lock-in, how did Adobe actually survive their transition? Well, they succeeded because they deeply understood people. When they made the jump, they knew it wasn't just an IT project. They created this brilliant staff experience-a-thon, where employees tested and provided feedback on products as if they were everyday users. This totally shifted their internal culture. By focusing entirely on customer needs and encouraging massive employee engagement, they navigated that technical upheaval with a unified mindset. The technology is powerful, for sure. But the demerits are very, very real. If you don't have the internal expertise, the stringent governance, and the cultural readiness to embrace this shift, the cloud can quickly morph from a business advantage into a major hazard. So before you chase those billions in revenue, you really have to ask yourself, is the ultimate question whether your business can afford to move to the cloud, or is it whether you can afford to get trapped once you're there?